Telford and Wrekin. Due to current COVID-19 restrictions, today's meeting is held using audio video conferencing and available for the public and the members to listen to via an audio feed on the agenda page on our website or via console and YouTube channels. Can I invite Reverend Matt Beer from Telford Ministry to lead us in prayers this evening? Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Councillor Mita, for inviting me alongside the rest of the Interfaith Council. Let's pray. Father, thank you that you draw near to us as we draw near to you. Lord, we pray that tonight you draw near to every family, resident, the elderly, the young. Lord, that you would sustain them in these unprecedented times. Lord, we pray for our NHS, for the Princess Royal Hospital, for our GP surgeries, those nursing in our communities, those struggling with mental ill health, and those who are in desperate need of medical services. Lord, we pray that you would draw near. We pray that your healing would come across our nation as vaccines are rolled out. Father, we also pray for our schools, for staff and teachers as they roll out online learning, as they care for the most vulnerable children in our communities. Lord, we pray, sustain them. And tonight, as the Telford and Wrekin Council meet, we pray for wisdom and foresight. Lord, for all the councillors and guests as they speak, that you would give them the wisdom that comes from you. Lord, wisdom for those decisions that need to be made, some that are tough, some that need so much thinking and hold so much weight. Lord, we pray for peace across our borough, for understanding and for hope to emerge. Love is patient, love is kind. It's not envious, it does not boast. It's not proud, it doesn't dishonor others. It's not self-seeking or easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. But these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Lord, we pray for our borough, that love would abound across communities, across racial and all sorts of divides that separate us. Lord, we pray that the love of Jesus would be made known. Lord, would you guide us this evening? We pray all this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Right. Thank you, Vicar. Much appreciated. Right. Before we move on to the agenda, many members will be aware that we lost Borough Councillor Roy Pickin, former Borough Councillor who passed away recently. Roy stepped down from his role as a councillor in 2015, having served on Lawley and Overdale Ward for 17 years. Roy served as chair of the General Purposes Board and Licensing Committee. He was also on Ketley Parish Council for many years. Roy's main passion was supporting affordable housing in the borough. There have been many officials, councillors and friends who have stated their respect for Roy, being a kind person who went out of his way to help others. Our thoughts are with his family and friends. Thank you. And also, before we start, could I remind members that if they're eating or doing other activities, could they turn their camera off? This is a public meeting, so it'd be much appreciated if we were quite formal. And also, members will be aware, and I can see some of you on screen, that we have new coloured backgrounds for you to use. So, right, I'll now move on to the agenda. Are there any apologies for absence, please, Stacey?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No apologies have been received.
Okay, thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Can you confirm any declarations of interest received in advance? Stacey?
None received in advance, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Are there any declarations from members present? I take that as nil. Thank you. Item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. Can I ask members to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 26th of November 2020?
Proposed.
No dissent?
Seconded.
Any dissent? Right, thank you. I'd like to invite the council leader, Councillor Sean Davis, to propose. You've done that. So I'm going through my list here. And Councillor Richard Overton has seconded. Right, and I declare the result that it is approved. So item 5, leaders' report and announcements. Councillor Sean Davis to address the meeting, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is my first opportunity this year to speak to full council, so I'd like to therefore wish all members and staff and residents a belated Happy New Year. This is already proving to be a testing new year in which the country was placed in a third national lockdown as the number of coronavirus cases rapidly increased, particularly with a new variant both nationally and within our borough. And as was the case throughout last year, the council continued throughout the Christmas holiday to work hard for everyone who was affected in some way by the pandemic, directly or indirectly. That hard work continues, and here are some examples. Our staff are operating the rapid testing centre open before Christmas in the very room that we normally meet as a council at Oakingate Theatre. All those without symptoms can get a test. Regardless of profession or working background, please do come and get a test. This is an addition to the NHS tests that are already for those people who have got symptoms, and there are a number of walk-in and drive-in centres across Telford and Wrekin. We do have testing capacity here in Telford and Wrekin, and I'd urge members of our community to act on the air of caution and get a test if they are in doubt. As part of the rollout of vaccinations in our borough, we are supporting the recruitment drive for the current and retired healthcare professionals and non-clinical staff. They will work in vaccination hubs to be based around the county of Shropshire and, of course, here in Telford and Wrekin. And I'm delighted, Mr. Speaker, that our staff are working right now to support the opening of the biggest vaccination centre in Shropshire that will take, which will be the Telford International Centre, where at the peak it will vaccinate 10,000 of our residents every single week. But on behalf of the council, I've made it clear that our offer to both the government and our health partners is that we will do all that we can to make this vaccination programme work. We need it to work. We want it to work. It is the most important task for this country in our peacetime, and as has been said nationally, this is a national mission that we must succeed in. Each vaccination means that the risks for our population decreases. That's how important it is. We will continue to work with our homelessness charities, our partners, in giving street sleepers emergency and longer term accommodation and keeping them off the streets. Since the start of this pandemic, we've helped 363 street sleeping cases. During the festive period, in response to our appeal to financial donations to a central fund to be split between Stay, Manning Place, KIP and the YMCA and Wellington, we saw the donations increase by tenfold. Thank you very much for the generosity of our community. Our job box service has given help and advice to more than 1,000 people, some of which have found work through our job match scheme that pairs businesses with job opportunities for our community. We are ready once again to administer the government's business grants support as that's come available today, and those grants are available today for our businesses. My promise on behalf of the Cabinet and this administration, Mr. Speaker, is that we will continue to be one of the best performing councils in the country in administering those grants, as we have been throughout the pandemic. Before the pandemic, we dealt with the flooding of the River Severn at the beginning of 2020. That was also how the year ended. We've worked closely with the Environment Agency on ways to minimise the flood risk to residents and businesses in the Ironbridge Gorge for the future. The Environment Agency is changing the way it installs flood defences. Our contribution to that joint effort will to be redesign and resurface the wharfage, and that work starts in the next few days. Our new state-of-the-art CCTV system is now live in most parts of the borough, with more areas coming on board. And we are absolutely committed to ensuring that our community feels safe and they are safe. I'm delighted that more than 140 cameras are now monitoring Dorley, Oaken Gates, Wellington, parts of the town centre, with more cameras coming online in Madeley, Newport and other areas, including Donington. By the end of March, there will be 400 new upgraded high quality cameras keeping our people safe across this borough. We've launched a dedicated project in Brookside to make our residents in Brookside feel safer and to reduce crime. And I know that yourself, Mr. Speaker, together with Councillor Jackie Loveridge, have been working hand in hand to support the police and our local authority partners in securing that investment and rolling it out. We submitted a £25 million Towns Fund bid to the government. This is an ambitious, aspirational bid which will see the transformation of Wellington, Oaken Gates and the creation of a station quarter in the Telford town centre. And I hope to have positive news on this bid in coming months. Our local plan review consultation ended and we're now looking at those responses. In conclusion, I'd like to conclude this presentation in the way that I started it, on the subject of coronavirus pandemic. I can't understate the importance of everyone following the rules to stay home, just like we did in March. And when you can't stay home, you're following the social distancing rules. People are dying in our Princess Royal Hospital every single week, Mr. Speaker. This is a deadly virus. But we also need to ensure that our NHS support is not limited to clapping on a Thursday, but it is also extended to following the rules when we're out and about in our communities. Our NHS staff and our care workers are working incredibly hard every single day to look after each other. Mr. Speaker, I continue to be frustrated about the pace of the vaccination rollout. That is not from a standpoint of being critical for critical sake, but it's about making sure that we want our community to be protected as quickly as we can. Other areas of England are way ahead of us, and I want us as a council to work constructively with our NHS partners and the government to make sure that we can catch up. We should not be below the national average, Mr. Speaker. We should be aspiring for the best possible vaccination programme that we can possibly do. And my commitment to the NHS, and I know that I speak on behalf of all members from all parties, that we want to do everything we can to support that national effort, and we stand ready and eager to help in any way that we can. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
All right, thank you, Leader. Thank you, Leader. I see that Councillor Bentley has his hand up. Now, can I just check that it is normal practice to take comments? And legal advisor?
Mr. Speaker, it's not typical to take comments on the Leader's announcements, and nor is it provided for in the Constitution.
No, I thought not. Thank you very much. Right, I now invite our Mayor, Councillor Anric Jawar, to address the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to start by wishing all our members and residents a happy new year. Members will have received the list of engagement in advance of the meeting tonight. I have continued to support the community and as and when restrictions have allowed, and therefore there are a few special events which I have recently attended I would like to highlight. VE and VJ film showing at the Wellington Orbit on the 10th of December, Telford Crisis Sport Baby and Toddler Bank launch on 11th of December, and opening of new Foundry Gym on the 13th of December. I look forward to continue the remainder of my year and to attending many more engagements in the near future. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 7 on the agenda, public questions. I would like to invite Richard Handley to ask his question of Councillor Eileen Collier. Mr. Handley.
Hi there. While carrying out the redevelopment of Horsey Pool that the consultation's out with, could you consider allowing the use of paddle boards and kayaking to take place? At present, there's no publicly available water to carry out these water sports other than the flowing water of the River Severn. I think they have a lot of health benefits.
All right, thank you, Mr. Handley. Councillor Collier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for your question. I've asked for this to be added to the Horsey Pool consultation responses. Unfortunately, it's not possible to undertake such activities at Horsey Pool as the depth of the water is not sufficient to allow these activities to take place safely, due to most of the pool only having an average depth of less than 2 metres. However, we are looking at other waters where this may be possible and are working with Severn Trent Water to establish feasibility on other pools. Hope that helps.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much. Could the Democratic Services Officer end the call to Mr. Hanley, please?
Unknown participant is now exiting.
Do I assume that's done? Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I confirm that the caller has left the meeting.
Right, thank you. Item 8 is Cabinet decisions made since the last meeting of the Council. Any questions or clarification from members on key decisions? Marked K in the report for item 8. Any comments? Clarification?
Mr. Speaker, Councillor Lawrence is indicating.
Right, Councillor Lawrence, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask the question to Councillor Shirley Reynolds. It's on the school's funding formula paper, which came to Cabinet on the 7th of January. I mean, it's clearly a very good news story at first glance that we've had an increase of 12 million from 125 million, taking us up to 137 million for next year. But what isn't clear, what I'd like to know, is the split of that between the different funding blocks. There is some information in the paper, but the schools block, the high needs block and the early years block, it's not clear how that split is achieved. If that could be clarified, that would be helpful.
Right, thank you. Councillor?
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. I know the early years block is split with 12 million and the high needs block is split with 28 million. The central school services block has got an allocation of 1 million and the remaining is the schools block, if that answers your question.
Yeah, could you tell us how that increased from the previous year? Because that's not so clear.
Certainly don't have that information to hand tonight, but I'm more than happy to get that information to you.
Thank you very much, it'd be helpful.
All right, thank you. Councillor Ian Fletcher?
Sorry. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was looking at the proposals for 21-22 for consultation, and I'd like to ask the Cabinet Member for Finance on in the documents on Appendix 9, which shows the base budget movements. It's got income, expenditure, savings, council cracks an increase, but then there's a residual gap of £386,000. Is it her proposal that we are going to set a negative invalid budget for next year?
Councillor Evans?
Thank you, Ian. No, of course, we couldn't by law, even if we
We're breaking up, Councillor Evans.
Don't want to, I don't need to. Apologies, there's nothing about it, I'm afraid. No, we weren't intending to, but I can get back to you with some details.
Yeah, could you do that, because you were breaking up? All right, thank you very much. Councillor Veronica Fletcher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's to Councillor Shirley Reynolds regarding SACRE. Every year, there is a budget for SACRE to carry out its statutory duties from government. This last financial year and this financial year, we are in the process of reviewing all the curriculum in the borough, because it is a statutory requirement every 5 years. We need to know how much we will be allocated, because it could cost a minimum of £6,000 to carry out our statutory duty. Would you please let us know whether that money has been allocated for this year's budget? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Fletcher. I believe this was raised in the meeting by Councillor Dugmore, and I was also had it confirmed to me by officers that this had actually been answered already. But I certainly know that the money that's been carried forward from last year in the budget for the officer time has still been allocated. I can get you a written response to ensure that you've actually got that for you, but I know it is confirmed that the money is still in the budget this year as it was last year.
But can I just say, Councillor Reynolds, the money that is for officers' use, but the thing is, it is the actual review of the curriculum, and the process is a statutory process, and that costs more money than the normal allocation that we had last year and this year, because it could cost up to £6,000 to carry out that review.
Yeah,
and then
so
that goes into, and then the schools.
Part of the budget process, because it certainly wasn't part of the school funding formula. So you're asking it through the budget process.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. So
I'll get somebody to answer you that, because it certainly wasn't part of the school funding formula, because none of the detail per school is included within that report.
Thank you so much for your reply. That clarifies it. Thank you.
Thank you, members. There are no other hands indicated, so I'll move on to item 9 on the agenda, councillors' questions on notice. And you're aware of the rules that each councillor can ask a question as tabled of the appropriate cabinet member. The councillor may then respond, and the cabinet member may then respond as well. Right. The first question is from Councillor Peter Scott. Asked the following question of Councillor Sean Davis. Are you going to read that out, Councillor Scott?
I will, yes, please. I haven't got my camera on because it's affecting the audio side, so it'll please some people not to see me, but there we go. Yeah, I'll read it out. The question actually is, if I may say, that events have overtaken in the past few days, but I think it's worthwhile asking so people can hear the leader's answer. The question is, there is a lot of concern locally in the Newport area and the rest of the borough about the slowness of the COVID vaccination rollout, especially amongst the elderly and care homes. Other areas seem to be getting their vaccinations. Can the leader tell me if he knows why the Wrekin area appears to be left behind whilst others are being prioritised?
Right, thank you, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. And firstly, can I just pay tribute for the work that you've been doing on behalf of residents in Newport on this issue. I think we all need to cross-party be doing the same lobbying rather than get into sort of rude remarks on radio stations and so on. I share your frustration in regards to the rollout of the vaccination. We know that less than 50% of our care homes and care home staff have received the vaccination. That is a direct contrast to many areas of the country who have already completed all of their care homes in their areas. We also know that we are significantly behind the rollout of vaccinations across the priority groups compared to other areas. And just to give you one example, areas outside of Telford and Wrekin in the Midlands have completed the vaccination programme for the over 80s, yet we have not. And the best figures that I've been able to obtain is sort of 1 in 3, 1 in 4 of over 80s have now been vaccinated. And that is not good enough. And we do need to be working together as politicians and leaders of place with our members of parliament to be banging the drum for more vaccinations in our area. But there is some hope for our residents, and I think our residents desperately need hope. So I can confirm, as you know, Councillor Scott, that there will be a vaccination centre in Newport opening in February, and hopefully more details on that will be forthcoming in due course. There will also be the Telford International Centre opening the last week of January, and the council's team and together with the community are working around the clock to make that happen. I'm also delighted that AFC Telford United have confirmed that working with a pharmacist and of course being supportive of the leadership of the council, that they will be opening a vaccination centre at the football ground in the next few days. But we do need to go further and faster on this front. It's really, really important. Can I also take this opportunity to thank TELDOC GP practice for all the work that they've been doing, and also to highlight the fact that TELDOC, from my understanding, really want to do more in this area, but the red tape and the contractual arguments within the NHS do really need to stop so that we can allow GPs to be doing the right thing. This is not a good place for us to be at the moment on vaccination performance. We do need to be better. As a council, alas, we're not involved in the decision making. We're not involved in the organisation. But what we can do and what we will do and what we are doing is standing ready to help our partners, to help the community. I do want MPs on board on this. I want MPs asking questions in the House of Commons, putting up self-congratulatory videos on Twitter really doesn't get vaccinations into the arms of our community.
Right, thank you, Leader. Councillor Scott, do you wish to respond?
Just to say, really, I do appreciate all the work that Councillor Davies has been doing on behalf of the borough, and I hope he will continue to update us with any information, because it stops a lot of frustration and a lot of concern. But no follow-up question, and thank you very much.
Right, thank you. Right, I now ask Councillor Kelly Middleton to ask a question of Councillor Sean Davis, Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During this health pandemic, Telford and Wrekin Council comms team and public health messaging has, in my opinion, been outstanding, providing clear and concise guidance and information to residents, keeping them up to date in the form of social media posts, emails, letters, radio interviews and live Q&As. This is enabling them to engage and build confidence in our local public health message. We've all seen the negative impact of mixed messaging on how people respond and adhere to the guidelines. Do you agree that a vital part of fighting coronavirus is a consistent message to the public?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Middleton, Chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board, of course. I absolutely wholeheartedly agree that communication is really important. And that's why, as a council, we've been doing all that we can to keep our residents informed, both digitally, online, and also in regards to writing to every single resident twice with another letter, third letter going out this month. It's really important at a time of crisis and concern that we are using our communication skills and resources to reassure and inform, and that's what we are absolutely doing. Councillor Middleton may be interested to know that a recent Facebook post from the council attracted 500,000 interactions in the case of Sean, a Telford mum who contracted coronavirus and who was hospitalised. And her story really was a story that was able to act as a warning to many people to follow the rules here in Telford and Wrekin.
Right, thank you. Councillor Middleton, do you wish to respond?
I do, thank you. And thank you, Sean. I mean, this is a national effort, and as you said earlier, we all want this to be a success, and we all need it to be a success. What's your message to the community of Telford and Wrekin about the vaccine?
Thank you, Councillor Middleton. My message is very clear, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of all of our councillors here, that the vaccine is safe, it is life-saving, and we all should, when we are called up, go and get that vaccine. There is no need to travel hundreds of miles to get the vaccine if you can't or you don't want to. Just wait a little bit longer while we work on getting these vaccination centres set up here in Telford and Wrekin. But in the meantime, follow the rules. This new variant is incredibly dangerous. It's killing people in our county, in our borough, in our country, and we have to follow the rules. Stay home if you can. If you can't, practice social distancing. And if you're out and about in a shop, then follow the rules. Because you might not necessarily be hugely affected by having coronavirus, but you infecting somebody else who then infects an 85-year-old will actually be a very serious step indeed. And we need also, finally, Mr. Speaker, to speak with one voice as civic leaders here in Telford and Wrekin, that we want our NHS to succeed in combating this COVID-19 crisis, and we want our residents to follow the rules. We shouldn't be liking messages that undermine the NHS or undermine the public health messages in this country.
Right, thank you. I now move on. Councillor Nigel Dugmore, would you like to ask your question of Councillor Andy Burford?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mr. Speaker. Would the Cabinet Member for Health and Wellbeing please update the Council on the number of COVID vaccinations performed in Telford and Wrekin and Shropshire to date, with comparative data for neighbouring authorities?
Right. Councillor Burford.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Dugmore, for the question. Well, I have to say, I've got nothing to add to Sean's explanation and of the way in which we're frustrated by the slowness of the rollout of the vaccine in Telford and Wrekin. The NHS nationally have been quite guarded on these numbers, and the reason being, of course, that they're aware that it is patchy. I mean, to be fair to them, the logistics of the rollout are very difficult, and they don't want to talk about differences in numbers across different areas. But of course we do. If we're being left behind, and as Councillor Davis has said, we are being left behind. We are now starting to get figures through, but we still think that as Councillor Davis said, we've got something like 1 in 4 of the over 80s vaccinated, which really isn't good enough to date. The total so far that we had earlier this morning of all vaccinations across Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin was 16,000. What's more important than that figure, though, is how quickly things pick up from now, and we've outlined already in this meeting where new centres are coming on stream. So we expect to see a rapid rise in that number, especially for our over 80s and our care homes in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor Dugmore. Do you wish to respond?
Yes. Well, can we ask the NHS to supply this data as soon as it's available? Because obviously, we might overtake neighbouring areas when these new facilities come online. So it would be reassuring to the public to know that we were sort of keeping along with the average, even though it's been a bit of a stuttering start to begin with.
Thank you, yes. Councillor Burford.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Dugmore. We are now, only just this last day or so, starting to get numbers through, and we will be keeping a very careful eye on those figures to see how quickly we progress. And of course, we'll be promoting that and in the borough in terms of a reassurance, we hope, to residents.
Mm-hmm. Right, thank you. Councillor Dugmore, you also have a question for Councillor Sean Davis, the leader.
Yes, could the leader confirm the names of the group leaders and their deputies on Telford and Wrekin Council?
Yes, of course I can, Councillor Dugmore. The leader of the Labour group is myself. The deputy leader of the Labour group is Councillor Richard Overton. The leader of the Liberal Democrat and Independent group is Councillor Bill Tomlinson. The deputy Councillor Thomas Stranke, and news to you might be, Councillor Dugmore, I don't know, that the leader of the Conservative group is of course yourself, and your deputy is Adrian Lawrence.
Okay.
You wish to respond, Councillor Dugmore?
Yes, yes, I would. So can you just say, does the inclusion of the independent councillor at group leader meetings confer leadership status on that member, which would obviously have implications upon the on committee membership?
Thank you, Councillor Dugmore. I don't know what leadership meetings you're referring to. As you know, since you've become leader of your group, I've held a number of meetings with yourself and Councillor Tomlinson, and that hasn't included any other councillors. The only meeting that I can think about where other councillors other than the deputies have attended a meeting where the group leaders are present is on vaccinations, when Councillor Peter Scott attended. And given the leading nature of Councillor Scott's campaign in Newport on vaccinations, and given the cross-party importance of vaccinations, I thought it only proper to invite the only independent member of the council to that meeting alongside myself, you and Councillor Tomlinson. I do hope that this is not a backward step to your leadership, Councillor Dugmore, which you've promised to be grown up in all the circumstances.
Thank you. If I can move on then, please. Councillor Jackie Loveridge, have a question for Councillor Shirley Reynolds, Cabinet Member.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the Cabinet Member for Children, Young People, Education and Lifelong Learning confirm the government's recognition of the issues of home learning during school closures, that Telford and Wrekin schools were allocated laptops at the beginning of the autumn term?
Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Councillor Loveridge. Last year, during the first lockdown, the government promised that our children would not be excluded from remote learning whilst they were unable to attend school. We received the first initial allocation of laptops for our children in care leavers, and the government agreed to roll out laptops to all of our schools. Whilst waiting for this to happen, we also developed our own Laptops for Learning project. We quickly realised there was a shortfall in the government scheme, and our head teachers were very clear. Hundreds of children were falling between the cracks with the national scheme, and we wanted to support these children. So we stepped in to help out with the shortfall of the government scheme and to support the most vulnerable children and make a real difference to the children in the borough to support their online learning opportunities. Eventually, the government acknowledged the digital exclusion across the whole country and the need for families to be supported with children's learning. An allocation of 1,600 laptops was made to our maintained schools in Telford and Wrekin, with a promise that they would be delivered for the start of the new academic year in September 2020.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Loveridge, do you wish to respond?
Yes, please, Mr. Speaker. Could the Cabinet Member also then confirm that the laptops promised in September were delivered promptly to enable children to continue their learning when they were not able to attend school during the current pandemic?
Thank you. Yes, in October, sadly, the government reneged on their promise and they slashed the number of laptops to schools, with only a fifth of the required number going to be allocated. Now, thankfully, they have done yet another U-turn and they've committed to fulfilling their original allocation. Many schools in Telford are still waiting for their laptop allocation, and it simply isn't good enough. I can only confirm the numbers for the local authority maintained school, but I believe from the conversations I've had with heads that academies are in a similar position. Our maintained schools were allocated, as I've said, nearly 1,600 laptops last September, with less than 500 having been delivered across all of the maintained schools in Telford and Wrekin by the start of the spring term. A fifth of the devices promised, and that just is not acceptable. The government is failing our families and schools, and vitally, the education journey of some of the children in our borough who, without that support, may fall behind their fellow pupils. I know of schools who were allocated nearly 90 laptops because of genuine need, and they've only received a mere 17. I wish I could say this was a one-off situation, but our schools have been waiting since last September for this equipment. The government issued guidance on remote learning without providing the means for it to happen to schools and their families. This is replicated with free school meals. As soon as an announcement was made, our school stepped up to the plate to ensure that our free school meal children were fed, whether they were in school or not. I can't thank them enough for this. Their care, compassion and commitment to our school families is outstanding. The government, by comparison, have only issued the new guidance on free school meal provision today. Sadly, some of the current provision to feed children is woefully inadequate, and it simply is not good enough. I am urging the government again to support our families during this third lockdown, and I ask our MPs to lobby their government to ensure that the children of Telford and Wrekin and our schools receive their laptops that were promised last September. How much longer do they have to wait? Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I now move on to item 10, recommendations from Cabinet. Can I have a proposer, please?
Mr. Speaker, I don't think we've dealt with item 9.
Oh.
The setting of the council tax base.
Well, item 9 on my agenda is councillors' questions on notice. It's item 11 on my list. To invite Councillor Ray Evans to propose the recommendations. Is that the one?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
All right, if we could move on to item 11, then I'll come back to item 10 in a moment. Right, thank you. Councillor Ray Evans.
The setting of the council. Report which determines the council's tax base for general and special fund purposes for the financial year 21-22. I formally recommend.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder?
I'd like to second that, please.
Thank you. Right, any comments, questions, debate? I've got Councillor Collier hand raised.
Sorry, I typed a message. I was going to ask if you could ask for the microphone to be muted. On Shirley's response previously, there was so much background noise I couldn't hear what was being said. But
Can members take note of that, please? Councillor Fletcher, your hand was up.
Yes, thank you, Speaker. I note the figure supplied in the report in Appendix 1, which is the final figure of the calculation. Previous years, we have actually had the full calculation made available to us, so we can see how the range of properties within our wards are distributed. Could I ask through you to the officer that I could have the full details of the calculation and the number of houses within each band within St George's and Priorsley, please? Thank you.
Yes, I'm sure we can supply that for you.
I think that was a yes.
I think so as well. Yes, you were breaking up, Councillor Evans. Right. Are there any other questions, comments?
Sorry, yes, it was.
No, still breaking up. I can see no hands raised. Is this a formal vote, legal advisor?
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I was having an issue with my mute button. Yes, it is.
Okay, can we go through the process then, please?
I'll hand over to Stacey to take the vote, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Councillor Bentley. Councillor Bentley?
He's muted. Okay, can we move on and then go back to Councillor Bentley?
Yep. Councillor Blundell.
For.
Councillor Boylan. Councillor Boylan. Councillor Burford.
For.
Burrell.
For.
Councillor Collier.
For.
Councillor Eric Carter.
For.
Councillor Lee Carter.
For.
Cassar.
For.
Councillor Cook.
For.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Dugmore. Councillor Dugmore. Councillor Eade.
For.
Councillor Arnold England.
For.
Councillor Nathan England.
For.
Councillor Evans.
For.
Councillor Ian Fletcher.
For.
Councillor Veronica Fletcher. Councillor Veronica Fletcher.
For.
Councillor Greenaway.
For.
Councillor Healy.
For.
Last one I heard was
That was Councillor Holt.
For.
Councillor Hoskin. Councillor Hoskin.
Miles has his hand up, but you're muted, Miles. I take that as assent, do I? Raised hand?
Oh, good.
Move
Mr.
on.
Speaker, we'll come back.
Yeah, I'm making a list.
Councillor Janker.
For.
Councillor Jawar.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Kiernan. Councillor Lavery.
4.
Councillor Lawrence.
4.
Councillor Loveridge.
4.
Councillor McClement.
4.
Councillor Mehta.
4.
Councillor Middleton.
4.
Councillor Murray.
Councillor Murray, you're muted.
Councillor Murray.
I can read his lips. He's saying 4.
Councillor Nelson.
4.
Councillor Offland.
4.
Councillor Overton.
4.
Councillor Gilly Reynolds.
4.
Councillor Shirley Reynolds.
4.
Councillor Steve Reynolds.
4.
Councillor Rhodes.
Muted.
Councillor Rhodes, you appear to be on mute.
Wait a minute then. 4.
Thank you.
Councillor Sahota.
4.
Councillor Scott.
4.
Councillor Seymour.
4.
Councillor Charles Smith.
4.
Councillor Malcolm Smith.
Councillor Malcolm Smith. Move on, Stacey.
Councillor Thompson.
4.
Councillor Karen Tomlinson.
4.
Councillor Bill Tomlinson.
4.
Councillor Turley.
4.
Councillor Watling.
4.
Councillor White.
4.
Councillor Wright.
4.
Councillor Bentley.
5.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Dugmore.
I did answer. 4.
Councillor Hoskin.
Miles has still got his hand up on the screen.
Councillor Murray.
Councillor Murray, you're muted. Can you press the mute button, please? That's the one with the little microphone.
We still have Councillor Boylan.
Councillor Boylan.
And Councillor Kiernan.
Right, I think we need to accept that there will obviously be a majority because there's been nobody dissenting, and those 4 or 5 members' votes would just be abstained, I presume.
The motion is carried, Mr.
Yeah.
Speaker, and those that we haven't been able to take a vote from, they will be counted as an abstention.
Yes. Okay. All right. So then I declare that the motion is, the recommendations are carried. Right. Thank you, everyone. Right now, going back, recommendations from Cabinet. Is that the next item on your agenda? Okay.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. So, apologies, I am having some difficulties with my mute button this evening. Just before we move on, Mr. Speaker, members may have noticed that we don't appear to have anybody but yourself on camera, and I'm not sure if that's just a glitch in the system or if it's intentional. But if it is just a glitch, I wonder if members could try switching their cameras on again to see if that resolves the problem. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I can see everyone.
Or it may be my system then.
Yeah, I can see everybody.
Yeah.
I'm fine, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back to recommendations.
We've asked in the past to actually switch the cameras off to help the procedures, really.
It does help speaking sometimes, doesn't it? Switching the camera off. Anyway, let's move on. Recommendations from Cabinet. Proposer, please.
Proposed.
Sorry, who proposed that?
Mr. Speaker, It's Councillor Ray Evans here, proposing the recommendations in the financial monitoring report.
Yes, we just voted upon those.
No, we've just voted on the base council tax.
All right, so yeah, my wording is different here. So, Anthea, so we voted on, as Ray Evans said, we now need to vote on the budget itself. Is that correct?
It's the recommendations in the financial monitoring report, Speaker.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, this is the financial monitoring report. So Councillor Ray Evans has moved. It needs to be seconded.
Okay, is there a seconder?
I'll second it, sir.
Thank you. Can I do assent, dissent, or has it got to be a formal vote?
You can do assent, dissent on this one, Mr. Speaker.
Can we comment on it, please?
I believe so, yes. Was that Councillor Tomlinson?
Yes, sorry to shout out, Arnold. I didn't want it to go through too quick in case people wanted to make any comments on the financial monitoring report.
Okay, go ahead, please.
I appreciate that. First of all, I just want to put my thanks to all those council officers for the work they've done to keep our figures as good as they are and to hopefully by the end of the year be achieving pretty close to our budget, Mr. Speaker. Not only do I want to thank the council officers for all the hard work they've done, but for all the local people out there that have really helped, particularly in the context of the pandemic, which has gripped us, and all the additional work everybody has had to do. To that end, I think this council had to spend nearly £19 million more than what it would have normally have spent. And at the last budget, we were still about £9 million short in funding, which was causing a lot of consternation. I am grateful now that the government have stumped up more money. I think up to the tune of 17 million now, which still leaves us, though, we're being shortchanged at the moment when everything we were promised was going to be paid for. Hopefully more money may come along, but we'll have to wait and see. But we're still £2 million short in what we've spent on behalf of the local residents. So I'm hopeful that hopefully with our Conservative members and our MPs could put pressure on the government to try and bridge that gap. So before we end the year, the government will have done what they promised us to do, was to pay for all the costs we incurred to help the local people with our costs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right, thank you. Councillor Dugmore, your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I'd like to reiterate that and thank the officers for all the hard work, and particularly Ken and his team who are keeping us on the straight and narrow financially. I'd also like to formally thank the government for helping to bail us out during this unprecedented time. There will be more money to come, definitely, and we would be in quite a much worse place financially if we hadn't have had this help. And it's a thanks to several Conservative governments who managed to get the government's finances into some semblance of order after the last Labour government, or else the whole country would have been suffering terribly. So I'd like to thank them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? No. Right. Assent, dissent. Is there any dissent from the recommendation to accept? So then I can assume assent. Right. Thank you. Right. Now do I go to recommendations from Cabinet?
That was the item that was just moved, Mr. Speaker. The financial monitoring report was the recommendation from Cabinet.
All right, then my printout is confusing because I've got recommendations from Cabinet and then financial monitoring report on two separate blocks. Right. So are we now on item 12, notices of motion?
We are on notices of motion. Notices of motion, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, 12A. I will ask Councillor Nigel Dugmore to move the motion, please. His motion.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Right, this. Do you want me to read it out, or? Yeah. Okay. This council calls for an immediate review of the relationship between Telford and Wrekin Local Planning Authority and ATP, the private planning consultancy established by this council, to avoid any perception that applicants paying to use this consultancy have an unfair advantage. Now, this motion is not about politics, it's about the independence of the planning process. The key word here is perception, as public trust can easily be lost. The Planning Committee must operate and be seen to operate without fear or favour, as it is a legal entity with an appeals process similar to the criminal justice system. While I have no issue with this council operating a planning consultancy, ATP, on a fee-paying basis, a review of the relationship between ATP and the local planning authority, I think, is now overdue. I'm not suggesting that anything illegal is taking place, though a review may find otherwise. I'm more concerned that there is a perception that applicants that pay to use ATP are more likely to have their planning application approved than those who do not. Disturbing evidence is emerging that council planning officers are encouraging applicants to engage with ATP by saying, and I quote, "If you use ATP, then your application is almost certain to be approved." That, members, is unacceptable and being a breach of the code of conduct and falls well short of the behaviour expected. While I accept that the whole point of using a planning consultancy is to ensure that barriers to refusal are removed and applications will always be more likely to be successful when using professional advice, it starts to be questionable when ATP consultants acting for applicants are also advising the planning committee, and indeed in some cases the same person. At the last planning committee, officers refused to accept that the committee did not agree with their recommendation, despite being given valid planning reasons. Due to a weak chairmanship, a new vote was allowed, a case of the tail wagging the dog. The planning committee is pointless if it is there only to rubber stamp the officer recommendations. What's the point of the appeals process? A criminal jury is not asked to reconsider if the legal counsel does not like the verdict. Planning officers are there to advise, not to decide, and if members are minded to ignore their advice, then the applicant has the right of appeal to the planning inspectorate. If the planning committee's decision is overturned, then the council's liable for costs, which may be the reason for officers being overzealous when the committee is going against their recommendation. This, however, is not a reason on which members of the committee should base their decision. They should stick to planning reasons and interpretation of policy. The planning officers advising the committee should be independent and seen to be independent of outside influence, and there should be mutual respect between members and officers. Behaviour like that witnessed brings this council and the process into disrepute. Action needs to be taken to restore the integrity of the whole process. We are told that this council is a cooperative council. Openness and honesty. We will be open and honest in the way we work. Fairness and respect. We will respond to people's needs in a fair and consistent way. A review into the relationship between the regulatory and commercial sides of the planning department would help to restore the public's confidence in the Telford and Wrekin planning process. I urge you to support this review.
Right, thank you, Councillor Dugmore. I see that our Chief Exec's hand's raised, because normally I would take the seconder next, but Chief Exec, do you have any comments that you wish to advise us on?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wouldn't normally interject in this meeting, but I would like to just respond to Councillor Dugmore and the comments just made. I think it's inappropriate to make those inferences that have been played out in the comment mentioned by Councillor Dugmore. I think it is appropriate that officers advise committees, all committees as appropriate, but the inference around ATP and officers suggesting that if you use said consultancy, then there could be a clear route through to planning is not acceptable. And I'm not agreeing to that. I think in terms of the protocol and supporting officers and members, it's not the appropriate thing to say at this point. I totally agree. Subject to decision made this evening that we will assess ATP going forward and how that works, subject to the agreed decision. But I don't accept some of the comments made this evening. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right, thank you, Chief Exec. Can I ask members to take note of that as we move on through the debate? Thank you. Councillor Ian Fletcher to second the motion, please.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I formally second the motion and reserve my right to speak later in the debate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor David Wright.
Thank you, Speaker. Could I just commence by saying that it's crucially important that members don't make allegations in relation to officers unless there is factual information. If Councillor Dugmore has any factual information, he must present it either to the local planning authority or to the police. And it's crucially important that members don't make allegations about the proceedings of the planning committee unless they have actual facts to present either before this council, the monitoring officer, or indeed the police. In response to the motion and the initial comments from members, firstly, the team is called APT, actually, so I think we should put that straight. I want to make it very clear there are no double standards applied to any applicant in relation to the planning process or planning functions within the borough. And this local authority clearly carries out its statutory duties all within the law. And to suggest otherwise, again, as I've previously said, is something that is extremely serious, and members need to consider what they say very, very carefully. It also generates confusion, but then perhaps that's the intention of the motion. Following changes in the senior management team last year, the new director with responsibility for development management, i.e. APT, as well as other technical services of the council, such as BIT, New Place and the estates team, has identified the need to review the outward-facing consultancy elements of the council, namely APT and BIT. And this review is actually underway and due to be reported back to me with findings over the next few weeks. I'll ensure that I advise members and the appropriate scrutiny committee of any conclusions I reach alongside the director of that service. This motion is unnecessary. I'd ask opposition members to withdraw it. If they wish to proceed, I'd suggest that colleagues reject the motion. I'd also say to members that the allegations that are being levelled need to be backed up with facts. Unless they can be, members should withdraw them immediately.
Right, thank you. Councillor Kelly Middleton.
Just to say that Councillor Dugmore, we're both from planning, and I think that's quite an outrageous claim, and I don't think you should be casting aspersions on us all like that. So I wouldn't support that, and I should think you should withdraw what you've just said about planning, to be fair.
Right, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stephen Bentley.
Councillor Bentley, are you on mute?
Right, Councillor Bentley.
Right, yeah. Well, taking on board everything so far been said, if we are undertaking a review of APT, I would like to see their services actually expanded. As a councillor that's attended many planning meetings, I get fed up of the bias reports coming forward from the prospective applicants being always accepted as being totally factual, despite evidence elsewhere. Surely, if we're looking to income generate, we can get experienced people within that particular organisation that can take on board and do those surveys, environmental surveys and everything themselves, and present an independent report for the planning committee to think and ponder on.
Right, thank you, Councillor Bentley. Councillor Charles Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to come into this debate, but some of the remarks made by Councillor Dugmore in his opening speech were bordering on being libellous or slanderous. And I would hope you would withdraw the remarks about the ATP consulting with the and advising the planning committee. The planning committee sits on its own, and it is actually, oh dear, it's actually. It's all right. Somebody said I'm muted, but I'm not.
Carry on, please.
I will do. Sorry, Chair. It's this new technology. I'm not used to it. Some of the things that Councillor Dugmore was saying were actually not correct. The ATP or APT, as they are, have never consulted with the planning committee. The planning committee sits on its own, and actually, we do have long debates on some of them. and these things happen, and they are totally fair and open and above board. We do not, in fact, listen to ATP or anybody else. We listen to the planning officers who advise us and also the legal advice we get. And I think Councillor Dugmore really ought to withdraw this motion.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Sean Davis, leader.
Mr. Speaker, it's more of a point of order and process, really. I do know that this meeting is recorded and it can be played back later. But I do hope that the full comments made by the Leader of the Opposition are reported accurately and verbatim in the minutes, so that individuals and organisations can take a view on those outrageous comments, unless, of course, he wants to immediately withdraw them.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Janice Jones.
I'd just like to say that I'm also a part of the planning committee, and I've never been a party to anything that's untoward in this way. And there are, just like to remind members, there are procedures where you can go through scrutiny to investigate anything which you feel may be untoward. And I feel perhaps that's the route that this should have gone down, and not in this public forum. I am very offended by what's been said, and so I'm sure of a lot of the planning committee and others involved with planning, and I'd like to see it withdrawn myself. And if it needs looking at scrutiny in other ways, then that's the way it should take place.
Right. Thank you. Councillor James Lavery.
Yes, I'm on the planning committee too, and I've never been approached by ATP nor been sworn by any external parties on how a decision is made. The information is presented by the applicants and the council officers, and I've never heard such a ridiculous claim as made by Councillor Dugmore in the first stage. I do feel it's inappropriate and should be withdrawn with immediate effect.
Right, thank you. I have two more hands raised, and then we will go back to the seconder. Councillor Peter Scott, please.
Well, thank you, Speaker. Yeah, as a member of the Planning Committee, I too feel this is an absolutely outrageous motion. We get far too many ridiculous motions just lately, and it brings the whole council into disrepute that we even consider discussing them. I would hope even the seconder of this one withdraws, and that we can completely say no to this one. It is awful to hear these kind of accusations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sahota.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a sub on a plans board, and I go there quite often. What I'm saying is that what is being alleged by Councillor Dugmore between the lines, and if he does not withdraw it, I think there is a case that he should be taken to the standards board and sort of get him to prove his words, or he should be, whatever the standard boards decide on it. Thank you.
Right, thank you. I now go to Councillor Ian Fletcher to second the motion. You have reserved.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, the motion has raised a question of the relationship between the people acting as ATP or ATP audit, not sure exactly how you pronounce it, providing private advice and also acting as planning officers. Having gone on to the website for APT and seeing all the information therein, it is clear that most of our planning officers do work for APT and such like. The question rises, well, who are they working for? Is it APT, which is working for independent outside people, or is it working for the council? I would draw members' attention to the fact that the recent rights of way consultation issued to all members, the officer clearly shows on his header that he's working for APT, not for the council. and also for the Register of Buildings of Local Interest consultation. It's the header thing is by a member of APT. Just look at your emails. So I think there is this concern of how the APT is working and how the council is working. I am glad the chief executive says that there is a appeal investigation review of the relationship taking place, because it is all a question of perception. Who are they working for? Or is it for the local authority, or is it for outside people? And I think that we need to have this looked at, why we asked for an immediate review. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Right, thank you. Now, I did indicate that we would move on to conclude, but I have Councillor Bill Tomlinson and Councillor Derek White, so I will take those two speakers and then we will move to Councillor Dugmore to reply. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Mr. Speaker. The point I would like to make is that the motion as put forward tonight seems a reasonable one. The inflammatory language that it was presenting with gives a different slant to it. Councillor David Wright and the Chief Executive have already both said that a review is currently underway on this relationship. If they make that undertaking tonight to publicise that and put it in the public domain, and other councillors have said if we feel that there's still further investigation required, then that can be also done publicly by the scrutiny committees. So if I think that undertaking is given, then this motion has already been fulfilled. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Councillor Derek White.
I find the presentation that the councillor has put into this motion is absolutely appalling. He is headline grabbing. He's obviously there, and this is not the way we deal with this type of accusation. If he has got accusations, there's a clearly laid down procedure in which any councillor who's got concerns about wrongdoings within the council should be going through, and that is immediately going to the chief executive or the senior officer in that department. To do it in this sly, underhanded way, it's just it's typical of Councillor Dugmore, and it is absolutely appalling. He should be ashamed of himself.
Right, thank you. Councillor Dugmore, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I mean, just a few points to iron out. There are no aspersions being cast on any members of the planning committee, and there's no suggestion that ATP are lobbying members of the planning committee. I'd also like to point out that I did say at the beginning that this is all about perception. I also said I am not suggesting that anything illegal is taking place. It's all about perception. As far as a planning officer, I quoted it. So if you use ATP, then your application is almost certain to be approved. And I'm quite happy to put any reviewing committee in touch with the person who that was said to. There's no problem about that. I'm delighted to hear that there is a review in place. And I did mention to the chief executive at one of our meetings that I was concerned about the relationship between ATP and in the planning process. As we've heard, a review has been requested for the reasons stated. There's little more to say. If a review does take place, well then great. And I agree with Councillor Tomlinson that everything should be reported, because it's important that the perception is that the planning process in Telford and Wrekin is completely independent. So if it's not if the review is not reported and it does not take place, well then obviously a review will have to be done by an external body. As I said at the start, it's important that there is no perception of impropriety, and that's what is my concern. Yes, I'm happy to pass on any details that I have to any reviewing body, and I urge everybody to support the motion and listen to what is actually said.
Right, thank you. I propose that we now move towards a formal vote.
Yes,
Are we
Mr.
on?
Speaker, are you wanting a named vote, a roll call vote?
I think that would be appropriate due to the nature of the debate.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'll ask Stacey to conduct that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Councillor Bentley.
For.
Councillor Blundell.
Against.
Councillor Boylan. Councillor Burford.
Against.
Councillor Burrell.
For.
Councillor Kalia.
Against.
Eric Carter. Councillor Eric Carter.
For.
Councillor Lee Carter.
Against.
Cassar.
Against.
Councillor Cook.
Against.
Councillor Davis.
Against.
Councillor Dugmore.
For.
Councillor Eade.
For.
Councillor Arnold England.
Against.
Councillor Nathan England.
Against.
Councillor Evans.
Against.
Councillor Ian Fletcher.
For.
Councillor Veronica Fletcher.
For.
Councillor Greenaway.
For.
Councillor Healy.
Against.
Councillor Holt.
Against.
Councillor Hoskin.
Councillor Hoskin.
Yeah, Councillor Hoskin is using the hands up signal, so I'm taking that as for.
Councillor Junker.
Against.
Councillor Jawar. Councillor Jawar.
Is that me? Against.
Councillor Jones.
Against.
Councillor Kiernan. Councillor Lavery.
Against.
Councillor Lawrence.
For.
Councillor Loveridge.
Against.
Councillor Clements.
Against.
Councillor Meta.
Of course.
I'm sorry, Councillor Meta, could you repeat that?
Against.
Councillor Middleton.
Against.
Councillor Murray. Councillor Murray.
I believe he's having trouble with communicating.
Councillor Nelson.
For.
Councillor Offland.
Against.
Councillor Overton.
Against.
Councillor Gilly Reynolds.
Against.
Councillor Shirley Reynolds.
Against.
Councillor Steve Reynolds.
Against.
Councillor Rhodes. Councillor Rhodes.
Oh, my God.
Yes, we heard you there, Councillor Rhodes.
Can you say your vote again, please?
Against.
Thank you.
Councillor Sahota.
Against.
Councillor Scott.
Against.
Councillor Seymour.
For.
Councillor Charles Smith.
Against.
Councillor Malcolm Smith.
He may also be having trouble communicating.
Councillor Thompson.
Against.
Councillor Karen Tomlinson.
Against.
Councillor Bill Tomlinson.
Against.
Councillor Turley.
Against.
Councillor Watling.
Against.
Councillor White.
Against.
Councillor Wright.
Against.
Okay, we have a few absent voters. Could you total it up to see if they would make any difference, please?
Yes, bear with me 1 second, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, we had 36 against, 11 for, and 4 that we couldn't ascertain the vote, so the motion fails.
All right, thank you.
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker, could I ask for your advice and that of the monitoring officer? There has clearly been a very serious allegation made this evening about the conduct of planning officers working for the local authority. What investigation is possible now under the Standards Board, or indeed by the council generally, or indeed with police, in relation to the allegations made this evening by Councillor Dugmore, who has reiterated that a member of the council, an officer of the council, has been suggesting that planning permission can be secured through the use of council services. Could I be advised accordingly?
All right, thank you. Monitoring officer, would you like to comment? I do have Councillor Jones indicating.
Can I just say that as chair of standards, do I need to be listening?
Okay.
I'm chair of standards, so I'm just asking the question.
Mr. Speaker, before I respond to Councillor Jones' query, perhaps just for clarity, and I'm not sure this is what Councillor Wright was referring to, but the Standards Board purely relates to complaints about member conduct. It isn't something that gets involved with any allegations against the council or against employees. I think all I can say in response to Councillor Wright's complaint at the moment is that officers will take his comment as a formal request to look into it, and then we'll take the action that we consider appropriate at that point, Mr. Speaker.
Right, thank you. Shall we leave it there, because there is those of us who are on the Standards Committee, we don't wish to be compromised in any way. So we'll now move on to Councillor Bentley's motion on transparency. Thank you. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a very simple motion, as you can see.
Mr. Speaker, point of order, please.
Who's that?
It's Councillor Watling. We've got an amendment to that motion.
Yeah, my understanding of the process is you hear the motion, you hear the seconder, and then you move the amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Am I correct? Yeah.
That's correct, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Bentley. Start again, please. Get your 5 minutes back.
Quite all right. I'm very thankful that the process was clarified for those members who don't understand it. Right. Transparency through consultation is a key element of local government and should be fully incorporated into the decision-making process of Telford and Wrekin Council.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, I can, yes.
Not too long.
Well, it'll be about an hour and a half because we're supposed to be 3 hours, aren't we?
Well, we have a mute button.
Never mind. It's been used before. If this authority is serious in wishing to create a community city of the 21st century, it needs to provoke thought and be prepared to be more flexible than recent history has demonstrated. Consultation is about engagement and getting the views of the majority, not the minority, and assuring people that you are genuine in your reasons for consultation and that you will act upon the information you gather. Unfortunately, this has not been the case recently, particularly in 3 areas of our work: accessibility, transparency, and decision-making. On accessibility, the assumption that the entire community has access to the internet is wrong. Therefore, we already exclude sections of our own communities, and exclusion is a form of discrimination. Transparency is the importance of openness and honesty, 2 of the principles of our authority. We should not be posing questions that are convoluted or repetitive, or posing questions which require evidence-based responses which could then contradict the assumptions provided within the consultation document. Transparency is essential in all we do. This is because it descends into decision making. The Localism Act of 2011 provided through legislation the ability for the lowest tier of local government and parish and town councils to shape, build, protect their areas and better represent their communities. They are encouraged by government and by Telford and Wrekin to produce neighbourhood plans following a referendum. They become part of the region, and they become part of the borough's overarching local plan. Unfortunately, there are many examples whereby the borough has not only ignored local views and comments, but denied local objections and concerns, and have not acted upon the views of the majority, whilst wanting, for whatever reason, to support the minority. Recent examples have been described by local residents as predetermined decisions within the Code of Conduct to which we all sign up, and this is not acceptable. Finally, decision making. You may wonder why I've included this heading when considering consultation. Simply to, as referred to above, when a decision is made to appease the minority by exclusion of the majority views and without evidence, then we are denying our communities the opportunity to listen, consider, and it appears to them that their views and objections do not matter because the decision has already been taken.
Right, thank you. Councillor Dugmore, you would you second the motion, please? Councillor Dugmore?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I was just unmuting and putting me video back on. Okay then. Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Transparency through consultation. Perhaps everybody will listen to what I say this time. As the motion suggests, is key. Now, there are many examples of Telford and Wrekin consulting with residents on many issues. In fact, the council spends a lot of time, effort and money on consultation exercises. True, many of them are statutory and it's part of the process. For example, planning. However, consultation is pointless and meaningless if the results of the consultation are not acted upon. Planning consultations are taken into account when a planning application is considered, which may result in amendments. Similarly, the recent resident survey will help to guide policy and decisions. However, it is impractical to consult on every issue, which is one of the reasons we have elected members. We, as members of the council, have the mandate from our electors to take decisions on their behalf and represent their interests and be consulted on these issues. In opposition, my group therefore have a mandate to represent our electors and be consulted. We can only do that if we have the information to monitor and call to account the decisions taken by the administration. We do this by receiving briefings from council officers who can give us the information requested without prejudice and political slant. This is why I requested shadow cabinet briefings from officers to resume as they used to take place, so that we could make suggestions, better understand and challenge council policies and decisions. I was therefore disappointed that my request was rejected, and once again request that opposition briefings are reinstated so that we can perform the duties required of us as opposition councillors. It is a brave administration that ignores the will of the electorate, yet this one seems to make a habit of it. As has been mentioned, for an example, the closure of a narrow single car gap in Horton Wood has caused a significant amount of anger to residents who now face a long detour to access their properties in the villages from Horton to Kinnersley and beyond. This was done over the Xmas and New Year period with minimum consultation just to satisfy the legal requirements. The closure will benefit a very small number of residents and disadvantage a huge number. Emergency vehicles will have at least a 10-minute detour, which could have fatal consequences. Yet this council has pushed ahead with the closure with scant regard to the affected population. And without meaningful consultation, democracy diminishes and poor decision making leads to weak and ineffective government. I therefore urge you to support the motion.
Right, thank you. Councillor Watling, I believe you wish to move an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I'd like to move the amendment. Can we put the amendment up? Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to move the amendment. We're in agreement with this motion and wanted it to go further, by showing how we adhere to these principles. For nearly 10 years now, we have been a cooperative council, and we've worked hard with all our partners to define our cooperative values. And just to remind ourselves of these: openness and honesty, be open and honest with the way we work and make decisions and communicate in a clear and simple and timely way. Ownership, be accountable for our own actions and empower others with the skills to help themselves. Fairness and respect, respond to people's needs in a fair and consistent way. And involvement, work together with our communities, involving people in the decisions that affect their lives, and be prepared to listen and to take on new ideas. These are the values that we have developed with our partners and community, and these are the values that we stand by. Mr. Speaker, this amendment helps us to see these values in action. Our recent resident survey, which have what I believe to be one of the largest responses from our community that this council has ever received, shows that local people are clear about this council's role and what we have been doing alongside our trusted partners to ease their burden during this, the most difficult of times. Myself and Councillor Ray Evans only this week hosted a budget engagement session with representatives of the voluntary and community sector and the town and parish councils. They were clear and that the approach this cooperative council has taken regarding not only the challenges of the coronaviruses, but also the many other challenges we've faced last year, included a great deal of consultation and transparency of communication. In fact, we could not have met the challenges we faced without this transparency of purpose and excellent communication by officers to react to the ever-changing instructions from our central government. Mr. Speaker, this amendment is meant to strengthen the original motion, and I do hope that across this chamber we can find it in our hearts to support the hard work that our officers have done to meet the challenges of what has been the most difficult of years. I move the amended motion, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, before we,
I'm now
Mr.
going
Speaker,
to...
please, with your indulgence,
I
want to understand through a point of order how this works, because that appears to me to be a statement, not an amendment, doesn't strengthen the motion as originally put down. So how does this work?
So you're not accepting it, right? I move on to the...
It's a nonsense. It's a statement.
Councillor Bentley, will you desist, please? I now move on to Councillor David Wright. Are you seconding the amendment?
Mr. Speaker, I'll second the amendment, and I'll reserve my right to speak.
All right, thank you. I have a number of people in order of list here. Councillor Eric Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Am I speaking to the original motion, or am I speaking to the amendment? Could you just confirm?
Good question. It's the amendment, I believe.
It is.
Because
yes.
I put my hand up to speak to the original motion that was put forward, although the point I want to make is relevant whether we listen to this or the amendment. So
right.
Perhaps you still want to hear what I have to say.
If you can continue then, please.
Yeah, I'm speaking now with my hat on as chair of the Shropshire Fire and Rescue Authority, which is a very, very important role. And if we go back to just to the issue regarding the Horton Lane, I believe that when this issue first came forward, it's very, very important to recognise that emergency services are crucial when they want to access properties down this lane. And I believe I, as chair of the authority, should have been consulted straight away so that I can then speak to our senior officers. What happened was Councillor Bentley came on to me. I wasn't aware of this particular issue, and I contacted Simon Hardiman, who's one of our senior officers at the Fire Authority, who then visited and then came back and gave his views. But really, the point I'm wanting to make is, I might be an opposition member of this council, but that doesn't apply when I'm talking as chair of the Fire Authority, whatever political persuasion I am. I believe that when we're talking about issues like this, where the emergency services come in, and in this particular case, the fire and rescue services is vital to look at their views, I should be consulted straight away so that I can then put forward our views as a fire authority for residents and the safety of those residents going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Adrian Lawrence.
Thank you, Speaker. What I wanted to share, can you hear me? Yeah. What I wanted to share is my experience on the council since 2003 in various different roles in, either as the cabinet member for finance or the shadow cabinet member. What I've experienced, though, is the opposite of this transparency. I understand the council wishes to present externally that we're a transparent and open organisation, but over the years, the access to information has gradually reduced. So going back, 10 years or so previously, it was we were able to get detailed access to all the savings proposals made by the administration at that time. But gradually, as time has gone on, that's been curtailed down and down. And most recently, the shadow cabinet briefings have gone, and we're feeling less and less confident that we've got access to information. So where it was free-flowingly and open historically, it's now as farther away from that as it's ever been in my experience at the council. So I'd love to say and agree with you that transparency is what we do, but I'm afraid it's not the experience that we see as opposition members. The organisation is becoming less and less transparent and more secretive in its approach to things, and that's the wrong way. The way for democracy is for everything to be open and straightforward. So I really wish you would consider returning back to the open flow of information we had, back in 2003 and onwards from there. I do accept to some extent it's due to the reduction in manning in finance and etc., but it's not solely that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Councillor Sean Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I take these allegations very seriously because actually since Councillor Dugmore has been leader of the consultancy group, I've met him personally, either on a one-to-one basis or with officers and other councillors at least 5 times since he's been leader of the opposition group. He also attends the cabinet meeting, which is, and as does Councillor Bill Tomlinson, each month. That is a discretionary thing. Not all local authorities invite cabinet members, leader of the oppositions, to cabinet meetings. I invite them to speak on issues, of course. And I think this is about egos of the opposition members. What this comes down to is because they don't feel they are important enough. And I've got to say, Mr. Speaker, that if there was a shadow cabinet, which incidentally is not mentioned at all within the constitution of this council, no such thing as of a shadow cabinet, but if there was a shadow cabinet, that would mean that 10 out of their 13 members would be members of the shadow cabinet, and they would have 3 backbenchers. Well, it's quite clear, Mr. Speaker, that is absolutely ridiculous. And what they do need to do is just live up to the fact that the last local elections, they were defeated considerably by this Labour administration. And when we recorded our best results, it led to the leader of the opposition at the time losing his job. And it now needs some realisation by the Conservative members that they are no longer as important as they think they may be. And for the suggestion that the Councillor Carter, as the chair of the Shropshire Fire Authority, should be consulted on every single road closure across Shropshire personally, well, that just goes to show how self-important Councillor Carter feels that he is.
Excuse me.
And the reality is,
say that to me ever again.
Can you please stop interrupting when people are speaking? Thank
no,
you.
I will not.
That Councillor Carter feels that he is self-important, and his ranting across the meeting demonstrates that point very much. Scrutiny is the way for opposition members to get involved. Committee structures is the way scrutiny members should get involved. Members of the opposition group are also members of external groups such as HOSC, and they don't turn up to those meetings. They don't turn up and speak at those meetings either. So they do need to take their duties somewhat more seriously. And just finally, Mr. Speaker, the hypocrisy on this point can only is highlighted by the very fact that earlier on in this meeting, I was attacked for inviting Councillor Scott to a briefing with other councillors. So it seems to me that the rule only applies to them, not other members. Let's have some grown-up politics, please.
Right, thank you. Councillor Gemma Offland.
Thank you, Speaker. Council. Gemma Offland, member for Hadley and Ligonier Ward. I take some of the concerns that are raised with this appointment from Councillor Bentley and Councillor Dugmore on their concerns raised with regards to Horton Lane. Let's just highlight a few facts here. So Horton Lane residents who I represent have consulted with them for the last 2 years, and that was not only done via email but via letter to every home, to all the people that I represent within Horton Lane, based on the fact that they raise multiple concerns over their safety with regards to speeding traffic, the amount of traffic going down the lane, and I couldn't see something happen to someone down Horton Lane, and since it has been closed, and bearing in mind this is a temporary closure that didn't really need to be consulted on, but Preston and Kinsley were actually in the meeting in October 2019, so they can't say they were consulted. However, what I will ask is the Preston and Kinsley representatives, have you wrote to your representatives? Have you asked them what they would like? However, what I will say, the situation prior to it being closed couldn't be left as it was. And people may say that, well, you know, there's not been no accidents. Well, we can never say never. And I wouldn't want to be that person that stood there and did nothing. It is open to discussion going forward. However, I represented Horton Lane based on their safety. And all I can say is this, I've had a letter from a mother from down the lane of a 10-year-old daughter who has never been allowed to play out in the lane ever. But since the lane has been closed, is able to go out and walk up and down the lane, which people haven't been able to do. So ultimately, I stand by the fact that I've represented the people in Horton Lane, and maybe the other members for Preston and Kinsley should do the same. Thank you, Speaker. Council.
Thank you. Councillor Jane Greenaway, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, I think I don't quite know how to follow that, but I'd like to pick up on the impact, particularly the major stakeholders, or namely residents, have experienced in a virtual world, and on the nitty-gritty day-to-day work of the council. So I'm sure we've all seen the difficulties that residents have faced from online consultations, as a large number don't have internet access, or if they do, don't feel able to participate, with the fallback options being limited. Now, when consultations are launched and residents get to hear, their first protocol is usually the contact centre, so the 384 number. And often it may have taken days for the information to come from departments down to the frontline members that are answering the phones. Now, we need to bear in mind, if a launch is about to happen, it shouldn't be assumed that social media or online notices are accessible for all. It should be an option to request and get paper copies or telephone interviews for those who have no other means, if this is the only way. A number of times, by the time the paper copies are received, the deadlines have passed. Now, I suspect there are a large number of residents, whether that be due to lack of equipment, disability, or the means to participate, and therefore perhaps not a true reflection when consultations are assessed. And that's all I'd like to say. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Right, thank you. Councillor Veronica Fletcher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Veronica Fletcher, Crisley Ward. The process of bureaucracy grinds slowly at times, which can be annoying and extremely frustrating. Consultations can be triggered by various criteria, resulting from public complaints, problems raised in planning, applications, etc., which may result in reviews followed by public consultations. And I have experience of this. The residents who have experienced extra traffic and parking problems because of new housing developments, their complaints are included in reviews, but not resolved, but are compounded every day by further complaints coming in and nothing ever appearing to be done, causing them stress and anxiety. The reviews do go on and on with no resolutions to the problems and take a long time to approve a resolution for public consultation. For instance, the equalisation of the speed limit on the main road from the M54, Castle Farm Way, which has 2 speed limits on it, 40 miles per hour and 60 miles per hour. This causes a great deal of anxiety, worry and concern of accidents happening because there are a set of lights in the middle of the 60 mile an hour area where motorists have to stop, go through that light at 60 miles an hour and go through again the other side at 60 miles an hour and immediately go into 40 miles an hour. And those complaints are coming in and being registered as an extreme anxiety for the people. Most of the general public do not know this process and are left in the dark. The process relies on consultation as the panacea for everything, and at times action is found wanting. The residents need and want speedy action and resolution to their complaints, not an indeterminate review and possible consultation on things that affect them every day, which brings unwanted angst. It is our bounden duty to all residents to help them and try to alleviate their problems wherever possible. Transparency and accountability are vital principles in everything we do. And transparency and accountability is important and vital in all our procedures, leading to consultation and consultation itself, and needs to be embedded and seen to be carried out throughout all the process in the public interest. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Right, thank you. Councillor Nathan England.
Good evening, Mr. Speaker. Just a couple of points, really. A couple of years ago, I think it was definitely after 2003, the Cooperative Scrutiny Committee carried out a review on the engagement strategy of the council. And I remember that having cross-party consensus on how the council carried out its consultations. And secondly, we had the Finance Scrutiny Committee meeting this week. Budget was brought forward, and I don't think we had any more information than what we had tonight, and there was no other members that were asking for a greater depth of information at the time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Right, thank you. Councillor Bill Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've only been on the authority for about 23 years, but I must say that at the moment, with regards to members, we've never had it so good. That's not to say it could get better. We are actually listened to. Officers will deal with our issues. Sometimes you have to ask. You can't always expect it to be gifted to you. But at the moment, I have to say, in terms of members, it's never been as good. But it could always be improved. There are still incidences, which my wife reminds me of, with issues that she had in her ward recently, where the thing was made public in the Shropshire Star and she wasn't consulted. So do we always get it right? No, we don't. But we can improve. It is getting better. With regards to the public, one of the best examples of consultation is the local plan, with its erstwhile desire to try and garner the views of the local public. Could that process be made better? Yes, it could. Could it be simplified? Yes, it could. Officers have responded to requests and have made that process slightly better, but it could still be improved in the future. So I have to say that both the original motion, you can see it's erstwhile until the political spin gets attached to it, and the second with the second amendment, That seems to have political spin. Just in other words, the motion then just looks as though we're supporting the council. I think the general public would like to see it happen and consultation actually be easier for them to take part in. I understand online is the only way at the moment because of COVID. Hopefully more of that can be done, less online maybe in the future, more on phone and post, which other members have said. So I think progress has been made, really has been made. It could be better, but I feel that both the original motion and the spin put on that and the extra bits we've had on the amendment are political, and I'm asking our group to abstain. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Councillor Bentley's indicated he wishes to speak, monitoring officer. I take it it's speaking to the amendment. It doesn't take away his right to reply to the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was just going to remind members that this is supposed to be debate in relation to whether or not the amendment should should replace the substantive motion. In response to your question, Councillor Bentley can speak on the amendment to the amendment as to whether or not it should be adopted.
Okay.
But Mr. Speaker, I would urge members to try to keep their comments in this part of the debate to whether or not the amendment should be accepted or not.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bentley.
Could the legal officer then clarify whether I'm allowed to actually speak again on some of the comments that were made about my participation in Horton Lane?
I've no idea. Anthea, have you any advice?
Mr. Speaker, the rules of the Constitution are clear that a member can speak in relation to a motion and then in relation to an amendment to a motion. And then if an amendment is carried and it becomes a substantive motion, there's an opportunity to speak at that point.
Okay, thank you. Carry on, Councillor Bentley. 3 minutes, max.
Well, in response to some of these comments that have been made, this suddenly has become all about Horton Lane, which it wasn't all about Horton Lane. Obviously, from the administration, there's a nervousness about how that took place and how it progressed. I can share with all members numerous emails from other stakeholders that are against this and weren't included in it. I can also share information whereby the meeting that was constituted for the minority in the Queen's Head Public House, when those that opposed what was going to happen turned up, felt intimidated. And as a cabinet member myself, on 3 occasions, I have gone through reviews on Horton Lane, instigated at one point an improvement down there, and it was an improvement. And at that point, since then, there have been no evidence whatsoever of any potential hazards or dangers, other than police being involved in 2 incidents where horses have been let loose in the lane, and 1 cow and some sheep. Now, if that's a reason for closing something, believe me, it's not a very good reason.
Okay, are you done?
Point of order. Well, I am for now.
Okay. Councillor Andrew Eade, please.
Mr. Speaker, could I make a point of order, please?
Please do.
The comments being made are not regarding the amendment put forward. Could we please keep comments to the amendment that has been proposed, and then we can move forward to the amended motion, or if it's passed, and make further comments then?
Okay, I'll endeavour to see that takes place, but it's, as you can see, somewhat difficult this evening. If I call upon Councillor Andrew Eade, he'd be the last person that's indicated on the amendment, and then we'll move to sorting out the amendment vote. Thank you. Councillor Eade.
Thanks very much, Speaker. I actually want to pick up on the comments of the leader, if I may, and I hope you'll allow me to do that.
If they're relevant.
Well, they are relevant, really, because they were said by the leader of the council. And I found that a mixture of arrogance and insecurity. Look, challenge is a key part of democracy. Now, what on earth is the administration afraid of? I put the opposition briefings in place probably 20 years ago now, And I also involved the Liberals in that, and I'm sure if Bill casts his mind back, he will remember that being done. It was done with the then Chief Executive.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
Michael Frater, of all people. Now, we understand from what it says at the time, and a number said this, that the opposition briefings were actually more searching than the cabinet briefings themselves, and that may be part of it. But look, we've heard about grown-up politics tonight, and really, I mean, we've almost seen like a Trump-esque statement from the leader of the council who's seeking to cut off information. Now, clearly, that is not right. Now, we need to get out of short trousers politics. Disenfranchising part of the electorates in this way is wrong. Now, quite frankly, the administration should be confident and open to challenge. And for that, we need the information to do it. Surely that's, you know, that is fundamental to democracy. Now, when I was leader of the council, I insisted, now I mean I insisted, that the Labour group, the opposition group, received full backup and briefings from council officers. Now, all we're asking for is the same in return. Now, what on earth are you scared of to actually grant something like that? What are you scared of what you're doing? What processes, what policies you're putting in place? Challenge is a good thing. I actually put a Labour member in charge of scrutiny for 3 years, so we had challenge. Now, you really have to start to rise to the occasion, and I do urge the Labour group and everybody else concerned with this to reconsider their position on this. Information and briefings like that are part of democracy. Now, you claim this as part of your principles, so on and so forth. I'm not going to run through those, but you really need to reconsider your position. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, given that I've been named by the leader of the opposition, sorry,
No, I didn't name you.
You referred to my title.
Well, may well, but no, I didn't name you, and neither is that a part of.
Is it any wonder? Is it any wonder, Mr. Speaker, that the former leader of the opposition is the former leader of the opposition with statements like that? The reality is, Mr. Speaker, I've set out very clearly.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Councillor Dugmore.
No one has a reply. Mr. Davis's interjection is illegal, and he should be told to switch off his microphone. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, Councillor Reid.
Sorry, I didn't realise I was muted. Yes, there is no right of reply when your name is mentioned. I would like to move on. I do apologise to you as my leader, but I need to follow the rules. Thank you. Right, now that is the final speaker on the amendment. Do I ask Councillor Watling as the mover to reply, or do I go to a vote?
Councillor Wright first, I think.
No, straight to a vote on it, Mr. Speaker.
Anthea?
Mr. Speaker, it needs to go to a vote.
Okay, and it needs to be a formal vote, does it?
Mr. Speaker, it's a matter for you. There's no requirement to it. I would be comfortable with an assent dissent, but Mr. Speaker, in your judgment, you may want to do a formal vote.
Again, there is a lot of friction on this subject. I think it's proper to have a formal vote. So would you proceed, please? This is a formal vote on the amendment. Those in favour say for. Those against the amendment say against.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sorry, Anthea.
No, my fault, Stacey. Go ahead.
Councillor Bentley.
Against.
Councillor Blundell. Blundell.
Abstain.
Thank you.
Councillor Boylan. Councillor Burford. Councillor Burford.
For.
Councillor Burrell.
Against.
Councillor Kalia.
For.
Councillor Eric Carter.
I was muted. Against.
Councillor Lee Carter.
For.
Sir.
For.
Councillor Cook.
For.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Dugmore.
Against.
Councillor Eade.
Against.
Councillor Arnold England.
For.
Councillor Nathan England.
For.
Councillor Evans.
For.
Councillor Ian Fletcher.
Against.
Councillor Veronica Fletcher.
Against.
Councillor Greenaway.
Against.
For.
For. Councillor Hoskin. Councillor Yanko.
Abstain.
Councillor Jawar.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Kiernan. Councillor Lavery.
For.
Councillor Lawrence.
Against.
Councillor Loveridge.
For.
Councillor McClements.
For.
Councillor Meta.
For.
Councillor Middleton.
For.
Councillor Murray. Councillor Nelson.
Against.
Councillor Osland.
For.
Councillor Overton.
For.
Councillor Gilly Reynolds.
For.
Councillor Shirley Reynolds.
For.
Councillor Steve Reynolds.
For.
Councillor Rhodes.
Councillor Rhodes.
For.
Thank you.
Councillor Sahota.
For.
Councillor Scott.
Abstain.
Councillor Seymour.
Against.
Councillor Charles Smith.
For.
Councillor Malcolm Smith.
I believe Councillor Malcolm Smith has dropped out of the meeting at the moment, Stacey.
Councillor Thompson.
For.
Councillor Karen Tomlinson.
Abstain.
Councillor Bill Tomlinson.
Abstain.
Councillor Turley.
For.
Councillor Watling.
For.
Councillor White.
For.
Councillor Wright.
For.
Just bear with me a second, Mr. Speaker.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, that's 27 votes in favour, 13 against and 5 abstentions, so the amendment is carried.
Okay, thank you very much. That now becomes a substantive motion. I don't want us to go through that whole debate again. So subject to there being no hands raised, I'm going to, is it Councillor Bentley next? Or does he fail having lost the motion?
No, Mr. Speaker, any member has a right to to speak on the substantive motion. That's now the one that's on the screen.
Okay, well, I would ask members not to go through everything that's already been said. Councillor Bentley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, obviously, I'm disappointed that the administration couldn't find it within their gift to support what was a very simple motion. Perhaps historically, we'll all remember what has happened when we have suppressed democracy and also refused engagement with stakeholders. You know, there's plenty of evidence of that about. Hopefully this will not reiterate here, as it has done in Washington just recently.
Okay, thank you. Councillor David Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to perhaps round off the debate a little bit, considering I'm the last speaker, or maybe, with just a quick remark about the local plan, which is now included within the motion. We have completed the issues and options consultation stage of the local plan, and Councillor Tomlinson mentioned it. I did take a view that I should extend that consultation due to the COVID restrictions, so we have tried to be as flexible as possible. We extended the deadline for 5 weeks to take account of the second lockdown. We have been very successful in securing comments to the process. Over 2,100 comments submitted by over 120 respondents. Those are residents and other organisations. I am conscious that members, including Councillor Tomlinson, to his credit, have raised issues about ensuring that the public can and have been able to participate. We've been using the website, Facebook, Twitter, online meetings with parish councils, stakeholders. I am conscious as we move forward that we may find ourselves in continuing situation in relation to lockdown or indeed further lockdowns. So we will take on board members' comments about how you can get involved. We welcome input into things like the planning process review through the consultation portal, but we also are more than happy to take written contributions, email contributions from members of the public whilst the consultation's open. What will happen now is we'll take a look at the consultation through the issues and options paper, and we'll be coming out with proposals in the early summer for further consultation with the public in relation to specific sites. I did note earlier, and I'll be brief, Mr. Speaker, that the closure of Horton Lane was mentioned during the debate. The closure has been undertaken on an experimental basis for a minimum of 6 to 12 months. This is under Section 9 and 10 of the Road Traffic Regulations Act 1984. Now, there will be opportunity, and there is opportunity during this closure, which is a test process, for people to feed back in relation to their views on this initial closure. And clearly the council will take note of those inputs from the public, and we'll take a view on whether the Horton Lane area should remain closed or whether it should be reopened. This is part of a traffic regulation order, and we are going through a process in line with the legislation. Just to reassure members, in terms of blue light services, any closure of any road is consulted upon at all times with blue light services. Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, thank you. I have no one else indicating to speak, so I now wish to go to resolve this matter. Do I need to go to a formal vote again?
Mr. Speaker, if I could suggest, excuse me, if I could suggest that anybody who wishes to vote against the substantive motion to put their electronic hands up, and then we'll be able to do a count on the participant list.
Okay, so I'll just do against first. Those who are against the motion, yes, hands are going up.
They are.
Mr. Speaker, could you also ask about abstentions on this one, please?
Okay, well, we'll do the against, then we'll clear the hands, and then we'll do the abstentions, and I'll do 4. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. Is that everybody that's voted against? I
have 10 against, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, 10 against. Right. If we could clear those.
Just doing that now.
Lovely. Right. Now those who wish to abstain, please indicate by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Mr. Speaker, can I just clarify, Councillor Veronica Fletcher, I'm not sure if you voted previously as against. I thought you had, but you're now shown as abstention. So perhaps, Mr. Speaker, we could invite Councillor Fletcher just to clarify her vote.
I think
the hand has gone down, yes.
Yeah, so I've now got 4.
5, Mr. Speaker,
5,
there's another one joined.
5. Okay, 5 abstentions. If we could clear that then, please. Right, now all those in favour, please raise your hand. Where's my hand? I can't find my hand.
At the end of your arm.
Yeah. All right.
You're sitting on them, Mr. Speaker.
Sorry?
Mr. Speaker, the motion's carried.
Okay. I don't know where my hand has gone. Right, thank you. All right, now we'll move on to the final item, the hospital motion. I invite Councillor Dugmore to move his motion, please.
Okay then, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, like many residents, do you want me to read it out first?
Well, it's only six words, isn't it?
Mr. Speaker, apologies. We've just made contact with Councillor Malcolm Smith, and he's asked to be dialed back in, and I don't want to disrupt Councillor Dugmore in his speech. So would it be okay if we just dialed him back in now before Councillor Dugmore commenced?
Yes, I don't see why not.
Thank you. Apologies, Councillor Dugmore.
Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking of a comfort break, but if we can be sensible over this, then it shouldn't take too long.
We'll see.
If I was you, I'd go for your comfort break, Speaker.
Kieran, can you confirm if we've got Councillor Smith back?
Not at present.
Are we having difficulties?
It seems so.
Mr. Speaker, in that case, I think we should move on.
Okay, Councillor Dugmore.
Okay, so the motion is this council has no confidence in the Future Fit Hospital Reorganisation Programme. I, like many residents, groan inwardly at the mention of Future Fit. However, it is important not to forget that it's still there in the background with all that is going on at the moment. It's hard to believe that it's been dragging on for over 7 years. Indeed, it seems longer. A lot of money's been spent getting to this point, but what point are we actually at? Not a lot has actually happened other than the costs of the proposed model have rocketed. The statistics on which the proposals are based are now woefully out of date, and the intended benefits are either unachievable or less relevant. Why would we want a 2013 solution to a 2021 issue? We all agree that the proposed reconfiguration is the wrong approach. Indeed, it is even less desirable now than it was 5 years ago. Yet delay and dither have been key factors in us arriving at this point. If common sense had prevailed after we rejected the proposals and our leader the leader of the council had accepted the invitation to go and see the third option, i.e. the Northumbria model, and without the time and effort wasted on the judicial review, which never happened, we could have been in a very different place. The leader of Shropshire Council could see the benefits and is supportive of this third way model. It is only the intransigence of the leadership of this council that has led us to the current situation, and if it goes ahead, well then we're losing the A&E at the PRH, the one thing that he pledged to protect. Sadly, automatic and outright rejection of anything that the Conservative group puts forward has condemned this borough to lose out. The irony here is that the third option, with better patient care for the entire county, of having a dedicated new critical care hospital between Telford and Shrewsbury and planned care at the RSH and PRH, was pointed out to us by the former chief executive of the PRH, David Sambach, who described, when I met him, his political views to me as being to the left of Stalin. So you would think that a Labour administration would listen to someone on the same side of the political fence. The fact that Mr. Sambach is prepared to work with us for the good of our hospital services highlights that the whole issue is cross-political and non-political. All any of us want is the best for our residents. The best option at this point in time would be a review of the current proposals, parts of which I'm quite happy with. The urgent care centre at both hospitals could proceed as planned. The planned care could be distributed across both hospitals similar to the original proposals. The only major difference would be the new build critical care hospital between Shrewsbury and Telford. Costs of the original proposals have spiralled, so a new build could be achieved at similar cost with the advantage of not impacting on services while it is being constructed. I am sure our MPs would be delighted to work with us, Shropshire Council and residents to push for a more relevant option that could have county-wide support. So come on then, you guys, let's join together for a better health service for everyone in the county. And if we work together, it will be amazing what we can achieve.
All right, thank you. Councillor Andrew Reid.
Thank you, Speaker. There's more than a sense of déjà vu about this debate on Future Fit. Otherwise, the hospital's transformation plan, as it's now known. I've said before, and will say it again, we have been utterly failed by SAF and the CCGs. And it's clear that both organisations consider this council to be of zero consequence. However, it's equally as correct to say that this council has let SAF and the CCGs get away with this dog's dinner of a process without securing a proper place at the table. Even now, I'm unsure what configuration of hospital services the leader of the council favours, having witnessed a variety of muddled stances and now seemingly to be presented with yet another one. The leader's latest stance, as far as I know, in January 2020, had mysteriously morphed from full A&Es on 2 sites, then on the PRH site only, to finally last January claiming undying support for 1 super hospital. This muddled approach, combined with a veritable vacuum of political craft, has led to this council being sidelined and dismissed by SAF and the CCGs as the project, which was originally earmarked to a cost of 312 million, has now escalated to many millions more. Continually flailing around to have spats with all those involved has significantly contributed to this council's effective isolation and lack of ability to influence the hospital outcome. Also, a recent attempt to link the maternity scandal with Future Fit is unhelpful, and I have to say I find that personally distasteful from my experiences. As previous Princess Royal CEO David Sambach succinctly put it, you should be ashamed of yourself, Councillor Davis, for making politics from the misery suffered by many families across Telford and Wrekin. Now, at this point, as Nigel's pointed out, I'm sure that David will be somewhat relieved for me to point out that he is indeed not a fellow political traveller, although I will quote Mr Sambach once again, who went on to say to the leader of the council, "You committed yourselves to a zero-sum game regarding how hospitals should be organised, and, in your mind, you think your community is lost. If it has, it's your fault." And I say this because in December 2017, the Northumbria report was sent to you and you chose to ignore it. Now, Mr Sambach also told the council leader, had you taken my advice and visited the Northumbria Healthcare NHS Foundation Trust, a trust classed by the CQC as outstanding on 2 consecutive occasions, you would not still be whining in the press about Future Fit. Incidentally, the Northumbria Specialist Care Emergency Hospital has just opened a £15 million ambulatory care centre. At this point, I will add my own criticism of the very top of the council's officer cadre at that time, who also received a copy of the Northumbria report from myself, but likewise displayed the same level of silence regarding the report, and an offer also to either visit Northumbria himself or receive the acting CEO from Northumbria NHS Trust in person. Now, it seems that the council's administration has formulated yet another cunning plan we're going to hear about, in light of which perhaps we should sit and ponder for a moment what this council might have helped provide for our community. Now, we really need to join together on this and work together. It's been offered many, many times. And to have a report that was undertaken by ourselves and a visit that was undertaken to look at first-class services elsewhere in the country, to have them completely ignored by the controlling administration on this council really isn't acceptable. And we're coming back to what we talked about before, about trying to work together, sharing information and going forward to try and bring the best possible outcomes for our administration. But quite clearly, it just isn't happening. Now, even now, you know, we could try and fight that, although it'll be an uphill battle. But there was an opportunity for us to unite with Shropshire Council, and I know that, that we could have provided a state-of-the-art hospital in the middle of both communities, and I think that would have been accepted within the wider community in Shropshire itself. Thank you, Speaker.
Right, thank you. All right, I have 2 speakers. Oh, no, there's an amendment been tabled, so I need to have Councillor Burford to move the amendment, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I assume, yes, there's the come up on the screen there. Do you know, as I go around, I get a lot of people still thinking that the council run the National Health Service, and to my astonishment, I find that Councillor Dugmore and Councillor Reid seem to be thinking the same thing. It's astonishing. It's a breathtaking assertion to suggest that this council is somehow responsible for Councillor as Councillor Reid and Councillor Dugmore suggest, for the decision not to listen to our appeal to think again on Future Fit. But I want to thank the opposition group for the chance to restate this council's position on Future Fit, or the Hospital Transformation Programme, as our NHS colleagues now call it. I hope our colleagues in the Conservative group won't mind if we provide some more detail in this resolution to remind the public of the recent history, and to give some thrust to the next steps that are necessary to taking our arguments forward. Since we last debated this issue in October 2019, the cost of Future Fit, as they pointed out, has continued to escalate and is now significantly over £500 million. A majority of this funding will be used to prop up and reconstruct parts of the RSH site, all at the expense of our currently fully functioning Women and Children's Centre and 24/7 A&E. If the pandemic has taught us nothing else, it has demonstrated how important our NHS services are in any borough such as ours. People's fear and anxiety about the virus has been matched by fear and anxiety about not being able to access crucial parts of the service locally when they need to. Of course, people realise they might have to travel for some specialist provision when they need it, but they want to know that emergency services are close at hand, and particularly in the light, and I don't apologise for this, in the light of the recent track record on the maternity services, that the Women and Children's Centre and its specialism is located in the area that clinical judgment said it should be just 6 years ago. Finally, let me reiterate the offer we made in October 2019. We refused then to go along with the opposition support for one particular alternative to Future Fit. Rather, we asked for a no preconditions discussion with our NHS colleagues about all alternatives. That's our position. It's the NHS's job to come up with alternatives. We can make suggestions, we can explore those with them. We asked our MPs to join us in that discussion. It was interesting to see the MP for Telford calling on us to support her in this after appearing to welcome the government's decision on Future Fit previously. The MPs need to get their government to open up on the discussion, and also on what's happened to the thinking on this, the strategic outline case. Where is it? They won't produce that for us. I assume they've got more influence on their party than we do, but maybe not. This motion is an open invitation for them to join with us, and I urge them to take it. Let's get the NHS to think again. At no point have they been prepared to. At no point. You've got to have two to tango. And just by putting up an alternative suggestion when they're saying no way doesn't get you any further. Join with us in pressing for an opening up of this debate. That's the way forward. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. Councillor Derek White, are you seconding the motion?
No, I am.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I formally second this amendment. This council and this administration have always argued that we have no confidence in the Future Fit reorganisation programme. This is backed up by the numerous motions and debates that we have held in these chambers. The clinical argument that backs up the reasoning behind why our Women's and Children's Centre was built here and should stay here, quite worryingly, wrongly dismissed by the Future Fit Programme Board and the CCGs. And as we look now to 2 fully functioning A&Es being backed up with ambulances as they fight the COVID pandemic, clearly shows that one side would just not cope. The pandemic, which continues to cause massive pressures on our NHS, should be a clear sign that we need to make sure the resources available are invested more wisely. Instead of attacking us, the Shropshire MPs would do better to realise the ever-changing scene in emergency care and the investments that are clearly needed to be put into the NHS, not to reconfigure it away from communities, but to make them more accessible to the communities they serve. It is now clearly a time to come together as one on an alternative solution, and to do this we need to make sure our local MPs are on board and supportive of this approach. It may have been a case of backing the bosses when the announcement was made about the money for Future Fit being applauded by both our town MPs, but the actual issues it would leave and the fact that it would downgrade our services locally should have been at the forefront of their decision making, and not one of getting a pat on the back from Boris and the Tory government who backed Future Fit against our representations. The amendment has a call for action in it, which I'm hopeful everyone in this chamber can support. Let's please get everyone together to look at this differently. And as we talk tonight about the NHS, can I just add a massive thank you to the NHS locally, its doctors, its nurses, and all the care staff, porters, etc., doing such a great job in these very demanding times.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Derek White, you're top of my list.
Chair, just to let you know that as chair of the joint HOSC, and can I ask all members of the HOSC who are in attendance tonight, whether you attend the meetings or not, that you should abstain, because this would show predetermination. Sorry.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Sean Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I also associate myself with Councillor Overton's comments about the fantastic work of our NHS right across the NHS, but most particularly in our local hospitals at this most difficult of times. We should be rallying around them, not trying to play party political games and a very emotive name calling by members opposite to myself and other colleagues. They do really need to grow up. The vast majority of residents understand what this is about, Mr. Speaker, and that is trying to blame the council for a decision that the council does not make, and the council has campaigned against significantly and considerably for many, many years. I think it is a bit rich that on the one hand we have Owen Patterson, we have Philip Dunn, we have Daniel Kutrinski attacking the council for its stance on Future Fit and arguing that we're being we're putting the case forward too strongly, too powerfully, that we're engaging residents in a way that we're throwing resources at the fight to keep our A&E and consultant-led women's and children's unit on the one hand, but on the other hand be accused of not doing our work properly. And I think most people in Telford and Wrekin can see through the bluster from the failed members of the opposition. This is a political decision, and the Prime Minister himself was in Telford only a few months ago when he and the Health Secretary, who also was in Telford a few months ago at the Telford International Centre, said, and I quote, Mr. Hancock, the Health Secretary, we are backing the decision that we made and that I published just under a month ago. This decision has gone to the Health Secretary. It was his decision that he made. He has backed that decision significantly. In the comments made in the House of Commons recently when they released money for the programme, it was a Conservative government decision. And as Councillor Overton quite rightly says, all of our county MPs stood up wanting praise for quotes, the biggest investment in the NHS in Shropshire for a generation. Not, of course, levelling with residents that biggest investment comes with downgraded services for Telford and Wrekin. So the problem is here, Mr. Speaker, very clear that our argument here as a council is diminished because of the games that are being played by the Conservative group. What they should be doing, and incidentally, the MP for Telford and the MP for the Wrekin should be doing, is joining us together strong, united message on this to the government, regardless of who the government is. If it's a Labour government, a Conservative government, the position of Telford and Wrekin elected councillors and MPs should be exactly the same. And I ask Nigel to ditch the approach of his predecessor and work constructively with me, secure a meeting with the Health Secretary so that, again, together, me, you, Bill Tomlinson, Mark Pritchard, Lucy Allen can sit in front of the Health Secretary and urge him to think again. The reality is we're being outmanoeuvred by your Conservative colleagues across the county, and we should be working together, even at this 11th hour, to secure a U-turn from this government.
Okay, thank you. Councillor James Lavery.
Yes, I'd like to go back even further. Councillor Moore and myself and other parish councillors was presented with the outline of what the future fit intentions were. And I can remember one of the things that they said they were aiming to do was to have a trauma unit within Shropshire, so that if there were major road accidents or things like that happening, they wouldn't have to go outside the county for treatment like they do at present. They also said that adult care and welfare, etc., would be included in this exercise. This was all slimmed down in the end, and there's no trauma unit. And the trauma unit, by having our trauma unit within the county, we would have a bigger attraction to doctors and specialist nurses who wanted to work in a trauma unit rather than an accident and emergency unit. So the strain on staffing would be resolved. So they failed to really meet the objectives of what they set out to do in the first place in the presentation of Future Fit as such. As far as the MPs go, I've heard lots of noises being made and actually seen letters being written by the Shrewsbury MP to the Prime Minister, but I haven't seen anything similar that's been published by the Telford or Wrekin MPs written to the Prime Minister saying, why is Telford being put to one side in such a way? So I hear the noises, but I see the actions, and to be honest with you, I'm not really impressed with the way things have gone at all.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Coldip-Sahota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm speaking in support of the amended version. Is that okay?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, that's fine, Mr. Speaker. I'm all for the Princess Royal Hospital having all these services there, Mr. Speaker. And the Future Fit, I think the Future Fit project is an obsolete one now. And this project should be no more. And, it should be an X project or something. And given all that has gone on for the last 7 years, and presently, I'm surprised to see that the Future Fit is still around. After 7 years, and there was millions of pounds we have spent on it, and then what a waste of money that has been, Mr. Speaker. Let's put it aside, this Future Fit policy. Put it on the side and start with a clean slate, I think. It's not just me who's saying it. Over 35,000 people, when a Telford and Wrekin Council did a survey some years ago, got in touch and said that there should be all these services there. Now, how's that for a public consultation? 35,000 over actually got in touch to express their views. I think it was 2-3 years ago. Like the motion said, Mr. Speaker, this COVID pandemic should cause a rethink of the priorities for the allocation of the £500 million that's going to be spent on it. Remember what the Secretary of State said, Secretary of State for Health said in his promise in 2015 when he was in Telford during the election. He said that we should have at the Princess Royal Hospital, we should have our 24/7 A&E service at the PRH and a consultant-led women and children services as well. So this is what was said. Now here's something else, Mr. Speaker, I'm nearly through now. When this Future Fit programme was conceived all those years ago, 7 or years ago or something, it was based on a population of Telford and Wrekin according to 2011 census. And that was some 10 years ago. The census is due again this year, and given the number of houses Telford and Wrekin has built in the last 10 years, and the population is likely to increase by, say, around 10%. So this will, by this Future Fit, this will be an old policy and will it not still be irrelevant in 10 years' time? I don't think it will be. So this is why I'm saying it should be obsolete. Besides, Mr. Speaker, here's something else. Our Prime Minister promised during the EU referendum in 2016 that there will be £350 million extra for our National Health Service. Remember the famous slogan on the side of the road. Well, with our share of that £350 million, I'm sure we can have a first-rate 24/7 A&E service at the Princess Royal Hospital with consultants-led Women and Children Centre. I support the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Right, thank you, Councillor. I have 3 more speakers and I want to try and resolve this. Councillor Gemma Offland, please.
Speaker, Council, what I want to say is that from my fellow colleagues, we understand what this pandemic has brought, and I think that the government needs to think again on their decision, showing what doctors and nurses are currently facing in this time, you know. And what I have to say is that they need to look at it again, and because people's lives matter, people deserve to have services on their doorstep, and time matters, and I think that's important to people. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly Middleton, please.
I just wanted to say, and I did point this out on social media the other day, that our MPs for Telford and Wrekin and elected members need to remember that MPs represent Telford in Parliament and not Parliament Telford. And also, we as elected members are to represent our wards and people's best interests. And Future Fit is not in our residents' best interest. And this pandemic has shown the extra strain caused by that, and we need to think about who put us in these seats and do what's best for them and represent them properly, and that means working together and doing the best for them.
Okay, thank you. I've now got 3 more speakers, but I'm reluctant to turn anyone off. So Councillor Bill Tomlinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I first of all want to also put my huge thanks online for all those staff and doctors that are working their guts out in both of these hospitals. And you know, there could be lessons learned from this pandemic which people would not have thought about before. That's why I like this amendment, because it keeps it open, it keeps the options open for experts who are far more knowledgeable than I am about things should be arranged. If all the MPs of Shropshire cheered at 500 million, I would welcome 500 million, but I don't think Future Fit will wisely spend that 500 million as to where the need is most. How can you clinically prove that you need the Women's and Children's Consultant Unit at the PRH 6 years ago? And since then, our younger population has grown. We've seen that in schools. There are more and more children being born in Telford area than there are in Shropshire. So that's where that unit should be based. It should be factually based, Mr. Speaker, and it shouldn't be based on emotion. And I welcome this idea that we could actually look to try and keep an open mind. Maybe the Northumbrian model is the way to go. I'm not an expert, but I would like all options to be considered. And I think our MPs should be publicly backing our PRH more than just backing the 500 million for the whole of Shropshire. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. Councillor Eric Carter, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be very, very brief. I was going to say something a little more detailed, but other people have touched on this. What I would remind people is what the motion put forward actually said, and I'm talking about our motion. It says this council has no confidence in the Future Fit Hospital Reorganisation Programme. So why are people opposite saying that we're talking about Future Fit? We're not. We're saying the Future Fit proposal is wrong. What we are saying is that an independent person who has expertise second to none, previously the head of the hospital, who is not a Conservative, is making a proposal which is very, very sensible. There's no politics in this. It is coming down to agreeing with somebody who is not speaking from a political perspective. Indeed, in his letter, it refers to his, if you like, disagreement with what we're doing from this council, but also what MPs from Shrewsbury are saying. So it's neutral. What I'm saying is we should be listening to this, taking note of it, looking at the very, very least, as Bill's just said, at the options for a central hospital, as in the Northumbrian model, and not just ignoring it. That's what I'm saying, and that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Raj, sorry? Councillor Raj Mehta, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, I've been listening to the meeting. I wasn't going to speak, but I could not carry on listening and not say anything. The doctors and nurses of the PRH do a tremendous job, as a lot of speakers have said this evening. But we just need to bear one thing in mind. We're living in Telford. We are Telford voted councillors. We need to be looking out for our residents locally. We need our PRH. We need our A&E. We need the services local to be kept here. And I think we need to be pushing for that. And the doctors and nurses, day and night, especially with the pandemic, what they're going through, okay, they're putting their lives on the line. So come on, let's look out for them as well, to keep the services here and to look out for them. And let's just be sensible about this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I'm going to ask Councillor Dugmore and Councillor Eade if they can accept the amendment, because it does accept your original motion. Are you prepared to accept the amendment?
I am indeed.
Thank you. That was Councillor Dugmore, was it? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Do you need Councillor Eade to support you?
Yeah, I'll certainly support Councillor Dugmore on that.
Okay, so then I'm ruling that this now becomes the substantive motion as accepted, and I'll deal with it by assent or dissent. Is there any dissent on this amended motion? I can see no hands or indication. Then, legal officer, can I declare that it is accepted?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the amendment is carried, so you now need to consider and vote on the substantive motion.
Oh, sorry, that's what I thought I was doing, because the people of the original motion accepted the amendment.
Apologies. Yes, you're quite right, Mr. Speaker.
Oh.
Apologies.
I'm right. Wow.
However, Mr. Speaker, I can see Councillor White is indicating, because I think he'll probably want his abstention recorded.
All right, I'll deal with that. Councillor White, would you like to speak?
Exactly that. You really need to ask for abstentions as well, Chair.
Okay, so those members of the HOSC have declared an abstention in this matter. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Offland, I'm in the process of declaring the result of the motion. You've gone. All right. I declare that the motion is carried.
Mine was just about my abstention as well, Speaker.
Oh, of course, because you're a health professional. All right. That's it. The motion is carried. I thank everybody for that. The next full council meeting will be the 4th of March. Okay. I wish you keep well and safe. Thank you.
Good evening.
Mr. Speaker, it's Councillor Fletcher here.
Good evening.
Is it possible that we could possibly get the system working it better? We're getting extremely large amounts of interference to the voice and picture, and we just mainly voice is the problem. We just don't know what's going on half the time because it's cutting in and out. Could we ask that the system be reviewed, possibly?
It's probably the internet provider. Probably the internet provider.
Yeah.
Well, can we ask ICT to look into it?
Yeah, mine's been fine.
Yes,
so-
please.
Yeah, mine's have been okay. Everything's been
Well,
recorded.
Mine's been good, Mr. Speaker.
Mm.
Probably
My-
the internet
my-
provider.
Some of the speed didn't make sense.
Incoming has been breaking up. Right. Thank you all.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for a clear meeting.
Thank you.